What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I want to jump in this conversation based on a comment I received from Infamous Austin. Big thanks, Infamous Austin, for the question around land expropriation with compensation and my thoughts on that. Well, I'm not really big on land expropriation with compensation or land expropriation without compensation. And I want to take this time to make a video and just go into my thoughts and how I arrived at that conclusion and why I see this situation in such a case. So, of course, land expropriation is based on the concept of government coming in and taking land. And of course, they do this in small scales, but from my understanding on the context that we're talking about for this conversation, this is something more of a massive scale, similar or akin to what Idi Amin did in Uganda, or what happened with Mugabe and President Mugabe in Zimbabwe. So, personally, this is why I'm not for land expropriation. Being a American African descent, African American, I look back as the 1500 or that age when the old world collided, Africa, Europe, and Asia. When these worlds collided, I look at it as the Europeans initiating this. The Asians had the opportunity, but outside of the traders of the Middle East, the East Asians kind of ignored the outside world. And I think almost to a certain degree, Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, was more oblivious to the outside world. And we really got caught um, exposed. And I think we got caught exposed because we didn't understand, I think, to the degree to which the scales of the world had changed. And this is why we were most victimized by this, by the brain drain, the resource drain of the continent. This is why you have me, a African descendant, sitting here speaking a European language. You'll go to Thailand, people speak Thai, of course. You go to China, they speak Mandarin, and various languages still have much of their roots in Asia. But a lot of lingua franca or primary language of the government is spoken in various African countries. Rwanda, you speak uh, English. The Congo, you have, of course, your various languages, but one of the popular language of education and government is going to be French. So, because of this situation, I think this bears the results of what occurred centuries ago. And as a result, I believe I have a moral obligation that I do not put on to anyone, even people that look like me. I have a moral obligation to do my best efforts to try to prevent such a horrendous situation occurring in the future. And I feel as though the way to prevent that is to be solid, to be thorough, as you will, to be economically on point, to be physically and healthy, to be engaging and cooperative in protecting your interests. And I don't think you can do this from a point of ignorance. I don't think you can do this by sitting out the game. You may be through with the game, but the game is not through with you, as the saying goes. And I think it's a level of communication in a global community that is required to be successful. If nothing else, just to know what the hell's going on. But you can't live in isolation anymore. Because I think what happens is you get caught on the outside. And so much of African history is referred to as the dark continent. And a lot of this is because in the darkness, because of the ignorance, the unknowns. Did various parts of Africa, did the Khoisan know about the Kikuyu? So do you have the part of South Africa that even are aware of what's going on in the Horn of Africa before 1500? Is this true? Possibly. I don't know. We don't have the written text to verify this, of course, because of the oral traditions of sub-Saharan Africa. But even then, there go another opportunity missed, right? The passing down of written language to converse with both sides of Africa. Basically, what I'm saying is to win, I think you have to be engaged. Now, if any country, but I'll use an African country for example right now, was to go on to an expropriation outburst, as we've seen in the past, what happens? There's a For every action, there's a reaction, and there's going to be a consequence proposed to that country. And a lot of times, that consequence is to go back into darkness, tariffs, cut off of markets. And another thing that I'm really not big on is basically the overall infringement of private property rights on a large scale. Now, don't get me wrong, of course, there are various reasons where land should be extracted from individual property owners, of course, such as infrastructure. But a large scale land confiscation, I think it sets a dangerous precedent for any government. And because I think a government are not there to abuse the people, but protect the interests and rights of their people, is another reason why I'm not a big advocate of this. Some people, I'm not going to say some, there are just as many people out there that believe that I'm in the wrong direction on this and that there was an injustice done that needs to be corrected. And they put their energy towards saying that they're going to take these people wealth and take their houses and property, etc. And of course, I think to what ends. But I try to focus my energies on creating wealth, not redistributing or going left pocket to right pocket. And what I mean by that is when I look at the opportunities, I think it's only so much opportunity you can get from fleecing the golden goose, right? I think you get more honey, more bees with honey than vinegar type of approach. When you look at the world is kind of split. This northern half and southern half along the lines of the equator. And being the world that it is, everything comes full circle. Being the globe that it is, everything's come full circle. You get this is very crude terms, but you have your Arctic level, your temperate level, your subtropic level, hit the tropics, and then what happened? The world reverses right back out and comes full circle. Subtropic, temperate, Arctic again. North Pole, South Pole. Then you go into your temperate zones, your wheat bearing zones, then your subtropical zones, more of your rice bearing zones, and then you get into your tropical zones. We're making bananas here. Point of the matter is, when you look at the world split in half amongst those zones, you'll see that geographically, and this is one of those geopolitics 101 things, the world is split vertically into thirds. So horizontally, you have your two halves centered and meeting in the tropics and spreading out till you get to the Arctics. But vertically, you're looking at North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia, Oceania region. Now, what does this mean? To me, this is God's ways of bringing us together, right? So that means you have, from north to south, you have a diverse array of produce, of goods that you can market to each other within the same time zone. So you can be in New York and call up someone in Santiago, Chile, to buy some goods, or Lima, Peru. I'll use Lima because it's more tropical, or even better yet, Brazil, with the big Amazon there. But you can use it and you will have roughly the same time frame to exchange extremely different goods. Europe, where most of these settlers in Africa come from, is a natural customer of Africa, just as much as Africa is a natural customer of Europe. Europe has goods, capital, different produce. One of the things going on is the grain deal with Ukraine and Russia, because African countries have become so acclimated, or they appreciate wheat now, a crop that is grown outside of the tropical conditions. And just conversely, Africa can sell a lot of things. It's amazing demographics. Europe has very poor demographics. The tropical goods that are not produced in Europe. They even tried to create counterfeit versions, artificial versions. This is where you get beet sugar from in Germany. But what did Europe do? Africa was too dense, too strong for Europe to thoroughly penetrate. So they went and found tropical islands that were more easily attainable. How did Europeans get wealthy? They set up tropical factories. They were selling sugar. They were selling other tropical goods that they couldn't get in Europe, and they sold it to Europeans. This is the source of their wealth, their connections to the tropical belt. So I will always say that I think if Africa wanted to develop in a very intense way, is to build those relationships. Build relationships with subtropical or temperate zone countries such as Argentina, the United States and Canada, Europe. Play them off each other while you consolidate your industries at home. Because I tell you right now, of all the tropical goods that I can think of, or subtropical tropical goods, that Africa has more than enough capacity to dominate industries in, Africa is not, one African country is not a major producer of these. Coffee, coconuts, rice, rubber, palm oil, coffee. Take a look at those goods. Just Google those goods and find out who the top producer of them are. And you know who you're going to see? Countries like Thailand, India, Indonesia, Brazil. Not one African country is leading the charge on any one of those goods. I always say this is how you separate, this is how Africa developed. That ability to play, Africa has an opportunity through their demographics and resources to separate this Atlantic bond between the United States and Europe. Because Europeans, if you appeal to their greed, I would never appeal to their humanitarian, because if they were so too much humanitarian, the institution of Atlantic slavery could never exist in the first place. But there is an opportunity for Africa to gain immensely through understanding of financial markets, understanding the goods and supply chains, infrastructure, things that, like Asia, developed overnight. Many countries in the corner of Africa that you never heard of, countries like a Burundi or Gabon or Central African Republic, through their own resources, could develop like nothing if they had the exposure and access to some of these, the capital and infrastructure of Europe. And once they're able to develop and get to where they want, then they can say, okay, we are powerful enough that we can go take the property of these people and we don't have to worry about repercussions. Just like China or America today doesn't have to worry about repercussions, because nobody is too insane to want to put restrictions and tariffs on China and America because their markets are so valuable. But I also think by that point, I don't think governments are going to be concerned with trying to take vineyards and houses from old classes of people. Those people will be irrelevant because so much new wealth had been created through these relationships based off mutual utility that has occurred for them. So I just think life is short, and it's a trade-off to anything you do. There are no solutions, only trade-offs, as the saying goes. And I would just personally put my energy towards wealth creation than wealth confiscation. To each their own. But those are my thoughts. Please comment below. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.